Welcome to the Washdown podcast, and this week's guest is Wendy Hummell. Wendy is retired law enforcement and the host of the podcast Guns&Yoga. You guys should go check that out. So without further ado, here's the Washdown podcast with guest Wendy Hummell. Cool.
Recording in progress.
I like the little voice. And so congratulations, you're our first remote Zoom podcast guest person.
Wow, I am. I didn't realize that. What an honor.
Just wait.
Uh-oh. Well, I could always run away and go out and you would never be able to catch me.
Well, that's true. It'd be a long drive.
Even if you were here, I don't think I'd run after you. Just watch.
Well, yeah.
Like she running.
He played softball with me one time.
No, it was more than once. I tried once. The rest of the time, I'm here, man.
Yeah.
Well, don't firefighters just work out all day anyway? So you should be in really good shape. Isn't that?
No, I like being fat. I like donuts and pancakes.
Yeah.
And cupcakes.
So we can talk about that. You know, Hollywood has done our professions a very big disservice on what it shows and how it portrays our jobs, you know, and it's really like I've been on my soapbox about that a couple times in the past couple weeks, and it's just like it's so annoying. Like I hate that crap where, you know, they're in a house fire and everybody's just kind of standing there and you can see from one end of the house to the other, and there's flames on the wall right next to them. I'm like, that's not reality.
Yeah. Well, I probably don't pick up on the things like you do when it comes to, firefighters, but I definitely know what you're saying when it comes to police. I don't even watch things anymore because they're not realistic. So.
Yeah. I really have found myself not watching a whole lot of TV.
I can't watch
lately. So
I just rewatch old shows.
I keep meaning to rewatch old shows and don't even do that. So I'm just too busy.
So I've started Lost in Space 4 times.
See,
four times.
I still have I got the new season to watch, and I haven't even made it through the Last Kingdom, and it's been out for a month.
Yeah, I'm just whatever.
So, anyway, so Wendy, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, where you come from, what you did, what you're doing, and then we'll get into it.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, I appreciate it. I love talking to other podcasters that are first responders or in the first responder world. So that's always fun for me. But so let's see, 1996 is when I started in law enforcement, and I'm originally from the East Coast. So I started out working on the federal level, and I met my husband. Spare you all the details, but essentially, like, I moved cross country to be with my husband. So the fact that I ended up in Kansas is really crazy. Like, I would have never. What did you say?
Great state.
It is a great state, but I can tell you that, and I'm not even joking, like when I told people back home that I was moving to Kansas, like the thought is like Wizard of Oz, like that's all I knew of Kansas. And I know that's really stereotypical, but that's what I thought. So I met my husband and I was working in New York. He was here in Wichita, although he's from St. Louis, but when you train federally, everybody comes together from all over. So for a couple of years, we did the long distance thing and I moved here. I relocated, joined the Wichita Police Department, and honestly, never expected to stay in Wichita. Major culture shock. I was like, I don't think I can live here, but I ended up living here, staying here, starting our family here, and retiring here. So
Wichita will suck you in.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I loved my career. I was one of those people, I don't know about you guys, but I always knew I wanted to be a cop from like a very, very young age. Like I knew it. And so I got to live my childhood dream. Never wanted to be a supervisor. So I only just wanted to be a detective. I wanted to work persons crimes, and that's what I got to do. So that's where I spent most of my career, gang, homicide, and sex crimes, until I retired in 2019.
Cool. So what were you doing federally before you went to a municipality?
I worked with, so now it's changed like 3 different times. I think it's now technically the Department of Homeland Security, right? It used to be Immigration and Naturalization Service. So I was a special agent for INS back in the day, and then it morphed into ICE and then DHS. So it's DHS now. So when my husband retired, because he stayed with the agency until he retired as a DHS agent.
Yeah. I think they just like using letters of the alphabet is really what because I have some buddies that, have done some cool stuff in the military, and like, it's always, well, yeah, we were called this, but then now we're called this. And then in a year, we're going to be called this. And it's all different acronyms, and it's the same thing. Just why do you keep changing the name?
Yeah, it can be really confusing. So when people ask that, I'm kind of like, okay, it's 3 different things since I was there.
Yeah. So you were a police officer, and then you started a podcast.
Yeah, I did.
So talk to me about like the transition, or what was the catalyst to like really kind of get you involved in the mental health and that aspect and starting the podcast.
Okay. So let me see here. Back, I would say probably about 7 or 8 years ago. So I retired about 3. So 7 or 8 years ago, I personally started to notice like I was struggling a little bit mentally, a little emotionally, physically. So I now know, now I can look back and I've learned so much, but like I had a lot of physical health issues that I didn't realize had anything to do with the kind of job I had. Some of it had to do with like fertility issues, getting pregnant, staying pregnant. My husband and I struggled with that. But then I also had some autoimmune stuff like that I didn't really notice was going on until much later. And then just because I didn't sleep very well, I mean, I had panic attacks. I started to just struggle all around. This all didn't happen all at once, but there was a pattern over several years. And so once I kind of realized what was going on, it wasn't like a light bulb moment, but it was kind of a gradual thing. So I started to practice yoga, and really I started doing that to lose baby weight. So I'm usually like I am a kind of a type A personality. I used to get up really early, hit the gym, no matter how much sleep I got. But I started doing yoga for the same reason initially. And then I started to realize it made me feel better, like even after I was done. So that was kind of my entryway into all of this stuff, because I started learning about self-regulation and my nervous system and all of those things. So all of that was kind of a slow, gradual process. And actually, I recently did like a podcast on this. I met a guy, he's actually from the Kansas City area. He's retired now. His name is Darren Ivey. He was a major at the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. And I hooked up with him through a program called Yoga for First Responders, because I started Googling yoga and cops, because I was like, I wonder, like, I'm like, I think I'm onto something here, like.
I can't be the first one who's had this idea.
Yeah, I know exactly. Exactly. So I was like, somebody must be doing something. There was a lot of information about yoga, meditation with veterans, right? And military, but not so much with first responders. Well, there was a lady who had just started a program, and she's not a first responder, but I vetted her, I talked to her, and she was pretty legit. So she was just starting yoga for first responders. And as luck would have it, she was having her first or her second training in Kansas City. And so Major Ivy at the time was kind of like helping her host it. So we met, he ended up coming to Wichita, and he had just created, along with Truman Medical Center, this resilience training program called Building Resiliency Surviving Secondary Trauma. And I think the story goes, they actually approached some firefighters first before the police department to say, hey, are you guys interested in this secondary trauma training? And whatever agency it was didn't buy into it, because back then talking about this kind of stuff, I mean, it's still not completely, accepted, but it's a lot more accepted in my opinion now than it was about 7 or 8 years ago. So he came and gave us this 4-hour class. I hosted him at our academy. And then it was just ever since then, I kind of like could never go back. You know, once you cross that line, you can never go back. It was like, I realized, you know, how jacked up I was, how I was holding on to certain things, why it just slowly started to make sense.
Yeah.
And so really ever since then, I haven't ever been able to go back, and I kind of switched gears. Loved working my job as a detective, but I really slowly started to shift my focus towards taking care of myself and then the people I work with, because we do a really bad job of that. So I figured we need to do something to better ourselves, right? Individually and agency wide. So that's kind of how it started for me. And then I started bringing yoga into the police department, and things just kind of went from there.
So whenever you started doing all that stuff, did you get some pushback?
How did you know?
Well, you know, I mean, we'll neither confirm nor deny, but yes.
Yeah. So what's funny is I didn't get pushback from the people I thought I'd get pushback from. So initially, when I approached my department at the time, the Wichita Police Department, and I said, hey, there's this yoga for first responders training, here's this resilience training. And the person that was in charge at the time of the training center was like all about it. They sent me to the yoga for first responders training, had me come back. They were very, very supportive of it. So, you know, as you guys probably know, it's all about who's in charge at the time in administration. And at that time in 2015, very, very supportive. And so I came back, started to roll it out. People slowly came to the classes. The recruits didn't have a choice, but it took a minute. I mean, you know, you can imagine the conversations, right, about yoga, you know, and squat and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
It definitely took a minute. And it's still, I'm not, to this day, people still probably would never come, but it is definitely a lot more mainstream now than it was back then.
Yeah. And that's kind of, we've had that conversation about just even the talk about mental health in our department and, you know, departments that we know around the area. And yeah, it's getting better, but there are still those areas of holdout, you know, of it's like, oh, you're, you know, throw whatever you want on it, you know, suck it up, or you're a wuss or whatever. You still hear that stuff, but I think as a whole, it's getting better.
Yeah, I agree. I see a difference between 7 or 8 years ago and now. And I do still see a lot of room for growth, but you know, we're a tough bunch. Like, one thing, I can't remember where I heard it. I probably heard it on a podcast, but there's 2 things that cops hate more than anything. It's change and the way things are. And my guess is maybe firefighters are like that too.
Yeah. You will never find a better bunch of complainers than
Yep. If you ain't bitching, you ain't happy.
Oh, I like that too.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're getting there though.
Yeah. So what led you to start the podcast?
Okay, so back like for the last couple of years before I retired my regular job, so all the stuff that I was just telling you about while with the police department, it was all collateral duties, doing this stuff. But I had become the Crime Stoppers coordinator, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with what crime.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a national program. So I was the coordinator for my agency for the last few years before I retired. So one of the things I got to do, I went to a national conference, and during one of the conferences, I sat in on a little training by a lady. Well, she's a girl. She was like in her early 20s at the time, who started the Crime Junkie podcast. Have you guys heard of that one?
I have not. No.
It sounds familiar, but I'm trying to place it because I've seen so many here lately.
Yeah, I got him started, and now
I know it's
I'm not busy enough as it is.
Yeah, you could really go down the podcast rabbit hole. I know I can.
It's not hard.
Well, that's how I ended up. One of the reasons I ended up starting this one is because that's what happened to me. I was just sitting there and going down through YouTube, just watching different podcasts, and I'm like, I can do that.
Yeah, and it's fun too. So I listened to this girl, and what she did was, a friend of mine who was a coordinator for another program, she was a volunteer because Crime Stoppers has volunteers in the community, and she started this Crime Junkie podcast where she and her friend, I mean, they're not law enforcement, they're just civilians, and they started to look at unsolved crimes from their own. I don't exactly know how they had all this access, but they would try to get information on unsolved crimes, and they talked to family members. So they started to monetize this so much that they were able to give back a certain percentage every month to the Crime Stoppers program. So that's why she was at the conference. And that was in 2017. And ever since then, I was like, I want to start a podcast. I was like, that's kind of cool. But back then it was still a little bit like, it wasn't like it is now. And I was like, there is no way I'll be able to ever figure that out. And I really didn't even know what I wanted it to be about. At first I was actually thinking about having it be Crime Stoppers related, because that's what I was doing at the time. But then eventually I was like, no, I want to start a podcast related to wellness and first responders. And it was an idea that I had for years before it actually happened. And so, if it weren't for my husband's or a team, it wouldn't be happening. He is like the tech guy behind all of it. I can talk to the people. As you can see, I don't have a problem talking. So I talk to the people, and he does all the other stuff.
That's what you need. You need an editor guy.
Yeah. Tried to get a tech guy. It didn't turn out that he was a tech guy. So I'm the tech guy and the booking guy and the everything else guy.
Yeah. My husband he hates it when I actually call him the tech guy, because he's like, I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm like, yeah, well, it sounds good to me.
Yeah. It's really, I have a little bit of background with music, so I am familiar with mixing boards and, a little bit of video equipment, that kind of stuff. Not anything super fancy, but like honestly, I searched, I watched YouTube tutorials, and that's how I put our whole system together, and how I found which, software to edit the video, which software to use to record the video. So yeah, I mean, the information's out there. I mean, and you can spend as much or as little as you want to do. So
yeah. And it's from what we learned, and obviously you guys have this figured out too, is that audio, I mean, we don't do a video podcast like you do. We just do audio for now, but audio is like the most crucial piece. If people can't hear you well, or there's background, they are not going to want to listen.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons, so whenever Rachel and I bought this house, we moved in, that was one of the things of, okay, we're going to have a podcast room so we can move it here and have like a permanent location that, we're not intruding on Chris's house all the time and, all that stuff. So, but this was just basically a blank basement on this side, the unfinished side of the basement. And I was like, okay, I know what I need to do. I knew how to do the soundproofing with the wall. I know it looks cool, but it actually has a purpose too. You might not be able to tell really with the video, but none of it is flat. So it's stepped out. So that helps break up the sound, so you don't get the echo back. That's why we have the curtains hanging up. We have soundproofing on that wall all around. So, and it's all about trying to get the cleanest, clearest sound that we can get. So
yeah, we probably have a little bit more work to do on that. But it's not terrible.
Yeah. Where is, cause I know I found a couple of your podcasts on YouTube, but where do you do most of your uploading and all that stuff? Where can people find you?
So, well, the name of the podcast is Guns&Yoga, and we use the Podbean platform, but you can get it on like Apple, Audible, Spotify, like most of like the big mainstream podcast platforms.
Okay. Yeah, that's we use I just went blank. Anchor. Anchor platform, and so it distributes directly to Spotify, but then also to Apple and I think 5 or 6 other ones, and then YouTube obviously. So whenever we first started and we were talking about it, I was like, yeah, we could do this audio one or video. I personally like to watch the video ones, and that probably stems from the Joe Rogan podcast, because and it's like, well, yeah, I kind of want to do that. I'm not going to spend that kind of money to get that kind of setup, but I mean, you can figure out ways to make it still look good, but not be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, my husband fantasizes that Joe Rogan will be a guest on my podcast someday.
So do we.
Yeah.
I tell him to keep dreaming.
Yeah. I wait by the phone nonstop, just waiting for that call to head down to Texas to do a podcast with him. And, it hasn't rang yet, other than
That's
scam
funny.
callers, but
So can I ask you guys a quick question? Like,
Sure.
because the name of your podcast, I'm sure it means something that I'm not understanding. Where did the name of your podcast come from?
Well, basically it's just one of the things that we do, like after a fire or
That's
there's
what-
car wreck or something like that. It's basically just washing the debris away.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, without getting too much down the rabbit hole, that's the significance of it. It's just
Yeah.
kind of, let's start over.
Got it. And I
So-
assumed that, but I just wanted to make sure because I'd meant to ask you that before.
Yeah. No, yeah. How long did it take us to come up with that logo?
Days, weeks. Here, this is what we're doing. I typed it into PowerPoint. This
Hey,
is the font.
These
Here's
are the only
color.
fonts I have. So
Yeah.
this is the choices we got. So
This is
yeah,
what we're doing.
we're highly technical that way.
I wasn't going
How
to pay
did-
for the extra fonts.
Yeah. How did you come up with the name of your podcast? I mean, it's kind of on the nose, but
Mhm. Right. Well, my husband came up with it. So let's see. He's a Guns N' Roses fan.
Oh,
go
okay.
figure.
yeah.
And so it really just kind of captures me, right? The gun part, because I'm a cop, and then yoga, because I'm a yoga teacher. So, but it really started, I wrote an article a few years ago. It was about how yoga and meditation helped me on the range, like perform better and calm down and self-regulate. So as I was coming up with an article, the name for the article was on Police One. That was what he came up with, but they didn't like that name. They changed it to something else. So that was like always in the back of my mind. Like, I really liked it. Guns and yoga. Like I always was like, we need to do something with it. And then it just made sense once we decided to launch the podcast. So
Yeah.
I think it works. I mean, I like Guns N' Roses. I like guns, and yoga's cool.
have you ever done yoga?
Yes, it kicked my ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually what people say when they've done it one time.
Well,
Yeah,
now let's clarify. He did P90X yoga.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, I could only do the first 45 minutes, and then they got into the advanced stuff, and I was like, yeah, I can't lick my own toes from behind my head. I'm not doing that. But
Yeah,
it was hard work. I mean, I
I
won't
have
lie.
heard that one is pretty intense, like power yoga.
Yeah. I went with Rachel to do Pilates one time.
And I've never been to Pilates. Like, so I don't really, I mean, I know it's along the same lines as yoga, but it's different.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's sometimes they use equipment and things like that, and sometimes not, but
Mhm.
yeah, the instructor gave me this like hoop thing, and she's like, this is yours for the day. And I'm like, oh, great. What do I do with it? Oh, you'll see. You're putting it between your legs, you're holding it over your head. I mean, I didn't think, like, it probably weighs like 6 ounces, and it felt like it weighed 1,000,000 pounds by the end of the day. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really should probably do yoga, because I stretch a lot, but not like, because I did some mixed martial arts way back, and whenever I was doing that, I was really flexible, and like my joints didn't hurt as bad and stuff like that, other than getting cranked on. But
Right.
I kind of let that go, and as I've gotten older, I know I've stiffened up. So
Mhm. Well, and we've got a lot of the guys that I work with. In fact, 2 of our yoga for first responders instructors, they're also DT instructors, which is kind of how I started too, when being able to incorporate it into training. But they're big into martial arts, and they work for the sheriff's office, but they also have their own martial arts studio, and they do yoga and they teach yoga for first responders, because it all just kind of goes it goes together really well. It's a good complement. Yoga's, it's just kind of like saying the word food. It's so general. Like there's so many different kinds. Like you said, the P90X yoga grass. I mean, there's gentle yoga, there's hot yoga, there's yin yoga. There's like all different kinds. It just kind of depends on what you're trying to do, essentially.
So I know we had talked about it a little bit before, but you went to WCPR this year. So what were you, and you don't need to get too specific with it, but like, what were you exactly, doing there? Like teaching them yoga or like,
Yes.
I'm curious. Yeah.
So now, like my full-time role, so I retired as a detective in 2019, and now I have a full-time job with the sheriff's office where I'm the wellness coordinator. And so one of my big responsibilities is to manage the peer support team. So when I started that job, I was telling you guys about a grant I was working on now. That's one of the reasons why I wrote a grant a couple of years ago, because to fund a peer support program. So as the person that kind of manages the team, meaning like I'm responsible for training them, bringing training in, and then additional training, we're also part of a statewide peer support network. In fact, I have my first Midwest sweatshirt on right now. I realized that was a coincidence, but so our training that we give to the people on the peer support team in Wichita is the same training that a lot of other peer support people get across the state of Kansas and in parts of Missouri. And that's intentional so that we're all trained similarly so we can help each other out. So as in that role, I have become familiar with WCPR, West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat, which is a 6-day like residential program. The word retreat, by the way, is super, super, like that is not what people think. It's really deceiving because it's not at all a retreat.
Yeah.
It's an awesome program, but it's not a retreat. When I hear the word retreat, I think of like yoga retreat, relaxing, chilling out. But we do yoga, but that's not what it's about. So as part of my role in peer support, that's how I got connected with WCPR, because there's a satellite in Kansas City. So even though the program originated in California, they now have these satellite locations that host the 6-day residential program. It's the peer-led, clinician-supported program for first responders who are struggling with mental health issues. You don't necessarily need to have like a PTSD or PTSI diagnosis, but it's for people who are struggling, typically work-related trauma. It can be personal stuff as well. And it is just, it's a really, I can't even put into words how wonderful it is to be a part of it. It's exhausting, mentally draining. You don't sleep a lot because it's all about 6 days for the people who are there as clients. But so I go as a role as a peer support person. And so in that I teach classes and I teach yoga and I do a couple other things too. So the more I become involved in it, the more they suck me in and the more they make me do, I guess is one way of saying it. I think I just have a giant S on my head, but no, it's great. It's really, really rewarding.
Yeah, that's pretty much how Rachel described it as well. It's very rewarding. It's draining emotionally and spiritually and every way, but it is very rewarding. So
yes, because it's not just the people who go as clients are the absolute focus, but the people that go as peers and that are in support roles also get a lot out of it as well. So it's just it's a really good program on so many different levels.
Cool.
Yeah.
You're killing it, man. Keep going.
I feel like I'm talking in circles, which is,
I don't know. I had a long day, so I'm beat. I'm sorry.
Okay. I hear you.
The dogs keep waking us up at like 4:00, wanting to go out, and then it's hard to get back to sleep. And
what kind of dogs do you have?
So I have he's almost a year, but a German Shepherd, and then 2 American Bullies.
Are they puppies? Is that why they're
No, they just I would say he's still a puppy. I mean, he's almost a year. One of them is 8 months, and the other, she's 1.5 years. So, but
See,
right around 4:30, he's like, "Hey man, let's go out." And he wants to play, and I was like, "No,
see, I told you, don't get a German Shepherd, get a pit bull.
no, I love my German. I've always wanted a German Shepherd. My wife bought me one for my birthday. So,
Oh, that's sweet. The reason I was asking was because we just got a puppy. And so the whole sleep thing, like that's been real at my house.
yeah, they do
Yeah.
better in their kennel sleeping.
Mhm.
But my wife works at home, and then we just like having the dogs out. But whenever they go to the kennel, I mean, they right into it. They don't care. They like their kennel too, but
Yeah.
it's just an us thing. Like when we had the last 2 dogs we had, they were always out and with us, and either slept in the bed or right next to it. So it's just kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Just dogs.
I got a 9-year-old pit bull and a 13-year-old Australian Shepherd that we inherited last year. So the Australian Shepherd is very regimented because she gets up around 6 o'clock every morning, wants to go outside. The pit bull, he doesn't get out of bed until you make him get out of bed. And then he wants food and then to go back to bed or to get on the couch.
That
So
sounds like my Weimaraner. I have a 5-year-old Weimaraner like that.
yeah, Rachel and I were at home the other day and we were just kind of, piddling around, cleaning up the house, doing, whatever. And Brownie, he's my pit bull. He followed me up the stairs, back to the basement, all around the house because we had taken the sheet off the couch. And so he couldn't get on the couch. So he's just following me around going, "We are supposed to be sitting watching TV right now. What are you doing? You're freaking me out, man."
I can't go on the couch without the sheet.
Yeah. Well, until we turn our back and then turn around and then he's on the couch in the corner and just looking at us like, "You can't see me here. These aren't the droids you're looking for."
Yeah, they're smart. Well, yeah, so my husband got a bright idea that we needed another dog. Everything was fine, in my opinion. Like we had this 5-year-old Weimaraner, life is good. He sleeps all night. He's got his routine. We've got 2 kids, we got a lot going on, but he decided, I don't know, he felt like our Weimaraner needed a friend. So now we have a puppy that's a Brittany, and she is a Spitfire. She's awesome. when she's going, and then she passes out. So
Yeah, that's typical puppy.
Yeah.
I love that part.
Ours still do that. I mean, they'll go, and then, hey, we're going to take a nap and then back at it again. But
Yeah.
they all get along real well. The American Bully we have, the older one, Baby, she just wants to cuddle all the time. She's a great dog. Then you got Stella, who's 8 months old, and her and the German Shepherd just play all the time. All the time. They're always biting each other. And I mean, not aggressively, but like, hey, do your thing. They bring each other on the ground, and like he'll lay there in the dirt and just wait. And then he pounces. And of course, he's tall too. He's going to be about 150 pounds when he's done growing. But he's a great dog. I mean, he's super gentle. Not so much with kids yet. They freak him out a little bit, but we don't have any little kids in the house. So
yeah,
working on that one. that worries me a little
puppies
bit.
are harder than kids. I've had them all. So, in some ways the puppies can be a little bit higher maintenance.
Sometimes my son was he was a pain there for a while, but
Oh,
he was a good kid overall.
yeah. So what's your, and I don't even know if you have any, but what's your kind of goals with Guns&Yoga, or what are you wanting to do with it? I mean, besides have Joe Rogan as a guest.
Well, that's not my goal. That was my husband's goal. But that's, it's not a bad goal. I like Joe Rogan. I remember him from, what was that show? Fear Factor? Was that
Fear
it?
Factor, yeah. What about news radio?
I forgot about that. Yeah. So I like Joe Rogan. It's just funny because he just thinks, yeah, wouldn't that be so cool? I'm like, yeah, what other podcaster like us is trying to get Joe Rogan on, please? We're probably in a long line here. So, originally I just started it to it was kind of like for two reasons. It was to, first and foremost, is to do like what I'm doing, interview people in the Kansas City, like in our local area, but also nationally, that can support first responders, like programs, first responders themselves, and family members, to tell stories and kind of help support in any way that somebody that's listening might need that support. And then I also do like these little microcasts where I'll like pick a topic about something I want to talk about. So, and it was originally just to kind of get that information out there. And also it's helped me because like, if I want to talk to somebody, like we talked about one of the guests I had on before we started recording, and that person, Sonny Privetto, he's been somebody that I sought out. I thought it would be really interesting to talk to him, but it was also really beneficial to talk to him because of some things I'm working on in my full-time job. So it's been a little bit of those two things combined. So there's really been no goal other than, and I don't really, honestly don't know how to make this work quite yet, and I haven't really had the time. I would love to figure out a way to monetize the podcast in a way that I can take most of the money that comes in and put it back into the community, into first responder funded programs, for instance, WCPR, and other programs that are nonprofits that support first responder wellness. So that's kind of like a long, kind of a big goal I have, is to bring money in, not so much like for myself. I mean, obviously to pay for equipment and stuff, because we've already spent plenty of money on that and not gotten any back, like we were talking about.
I feel your pain.
Yeah. And of course, the way my husband is, he's like, we got to do this right. So we have made a pretty good investment on some of the audio stuff, but just covering costs, but mostly to do that kind of thing, to be able to help and make a difference and support first responders in some way. So that's kind of where I'm headed. And we've got some ideas, like we have apparel. It's just not launched yet. And it's funny because people have asked, do you have a challenge coin? Do you have a sweatshirt? Do you have this? And so that could be a way to help do that. I don't know yet, but if you guys have any ideas, or anybody listening has any ideas,
we were going to ask you the same thing. When you figure it out, you got to let us know.
Okay, well, let's like let each other know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think you're on the right track with having the merchandise, having some kind of online store or something where you don't really necessarily have to keep stock, but somebody can go and order it. And then,
right.
I think Rachel had talked about that, doing t-shirts that way for something. But I think that's probably that, and get sponsors. I mean, sponsors for the podcast. And you never know till you ask. But a lot of the sponsorship stuff has to do with how many like consistent views or listens that your podcast is getting.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I've found, like with actually even compiling those numbers, is being on so many different, because I think we're on like 9 different platforms or 10 different platforms, compiling all of those numbers. And then some of the places it's really hard to figure out, okay, you've been viewed this many times. Okay, well, which episode? And, it's a lot of work to put all of that stuff together.
That's a really good point, because I've looked at that before, and really I'll just look at the Podbean is where our website is, because that's what we use. Yeah. And you look at that, and even though it'll show this is how many people downloaded the episode, it's not really accurate, because like you just said, it's only downloads, because even people who just listen, then you never know about those people. And then, like you said, you don't know where else people are getting it. So that's part of why I'm just like, just doing it to do it right now, because I enjoy it. And I think I like to think it's valuable. I hear that it's valuable. People like to listen to it. So I keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, and that's our whole goal pretty much too with ours is, if one person listens to something that we have to say and maybe doesn't go down, that bad path. Yeah. That's a win. So, I mean, as far as making money or anything like that, that's the furthest thing from my mind. I have a job. I love my job. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to quit my job to podcast full time.
And I'm in the
So-
same boat you are. And I think that's good that we're doing it for that reason, because there isn't that pressure
Yeah.
to do something like that.
It would be nice though, like you said, though, to be able to generate some income for some programs that are doing some good work and that need that financial support. Because I mean, the last 2-3 years, we've had friends that are running nonprofits, and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to do this, and then our fundraiser got canceled because of whatever reason, and they just
Right.
everybody's struggling right now, and nonprofits, some of them more so than normal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just like with different agencies and budget constraints and things like that, there's a lot of good things out there, but sometimes people they don't have the money to send their people to something, or even to offer a certain kind of training. So those are the kinds of things that I'm still thinking about, but haven't really come up with a solid plan yet. So.
Well, if I think of anything, I'll let you know. So.
Thank you. And same, yeah. But that's where I'm at now. Just having fun doing it.
Cool. Well, like I said, I listened to the one episode and I did like it a lot. I think you had some very good points.
Well, thanks. Appreciate it.
What do you think? And just give me your own personal opinion if you want to. What do you think is the number one factor right now for police officers, firefighters, EMS? We can even throw veterans in that. What's the number one factor keeping them from getting help?
Oh, from getting help?
Yeah.
I don't think it's different than what it was before. I think we're doing better. I still think there's stigma. As much as I like to say that it's changed, and it has to some extent, I'm still surprised when I talk to people that I know well, in some cases, that still believe that they're the only person struggling and that they don't want to get help because of the stigma attached to it. So I still think we have some work to do in that area. If you're going to pigeonhole me and make me pick one thing, that's what I'm going to say.
So I say
Final
pick
answer.
one thing, but I was going to say you can answer however you want. Just because I asked the question a certain way, it doesn't mean, because I mean, I would say the same thing. But I think it's kind of what you alluded to. There's a lot of factors that go into that stigma. And I think, you talk about I'm the only one that's ever felt this way type thing. That's just the lie that your brain's telling you when you're in depression or PTSD or, whatever. And a lot of the people that come into these lines of work, they're type A personalities, or, that borderline A whatever. So we're the helpers. We don't need the help. So then we see ourselves as weak if we need the help. So, and I think that just kind of and the culture of those jobs, it all feeds into that. So it's kind of a tough nut to crack as far as getting that culture changed.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with or where you work has peer support, but I can tell you that I think, and maybe it's just because I've been doing it for the past couple of years, that's all I've been doing, is I really see it's been really interesting to see that the more people talk about this to the people that they work with, so their peers, the more that this, I think we slowly, get away or kind of eradicate that stigma. Because the people on the peer support team, the training that you have to go through is pretty intense, at least the training that we put our people through in Kansas, intense in a good way, because you kind of have to be able to get at your own stuff so that you can help others. And so what that means is being vulnerable, sharing things about yourself. I mean, it's taken me, I've been working on myself for 7 years. And I just recently, a couple of weeks ago at WCPR, shared something in a way that I'd never really shared before. So it takes time to feel comfortable and build trust. But when we start to do it, I feel like that's something that's been really helpful, is for people to see, oh, so-and-so who I've known for 20 years or 15 years is talking about this. They've gone to see a clinician. they say that this works and this is okay, so now maybe I'll believe it, kind of thing. So I think that it's really powerful to have your peers talking about these things. And I just think we need to keep chipping away at it, because it definitely will continue to take time.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think, and that's, we've talked about it a couple times.
You got the younger generation coming in. It's different than even our generation. And then of course you got the older ones above us. And I think that's been the biggest piece of your culture change. It's because they think about things differently. They see it differently, and the values are a little bit different of what's important, especially when you talk like overtime or family time. Toward the family time, you're going to de-stress a little bit more than picking up like we do 3-4 shifts in a row of overtime.
Yeah, that's you. That ain't me no more.
Yeah, it's me.
So
I agree with you about the younger generation though, because one thing I teach recruits, and so I have a lot of contact with them. And like when we talk about this kind of stuff to recruits, they are way more receptive. Like it's almost like they expect it, because I think it's a little bit like, I have a 16-year-old, because I'm an old parent, and she knows all, I mean, part of it is she knows about all this stuff, maybe because her mom talks about it, but these are also things that kids are talking more about. So I think that it's definitely something that they're a little bit more open to. Not all of them, but overall,
no, but more, I think it's definitely more so, and that it makes it easier. Plus, they haven't learned a lot of the bad habits that we have with the amount of time that we've spent in the career fields.
Yeah,
that you just pick up over time. You don't even realize you pick them up until you're neck deep in a rabbit hole, and it's hard to get out of. So.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important, like for you guys, when you're talking to the younger firefighters, and same with us with the recruits, it's like telling them, hey, you really need to be proactive and preventative and take care of yourself and do X, Y, and Z so you don't end up like this. And so, and just continuing to provide those reminders and messaging throughout their careers, because some of them really get it, but I can see some of them are like, yeah, whatever, that's not me. I just want to go do this job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't think in terms of longevity either.
Right.
That's another thing that I've noticed, because you see more and more younger kids with, just between 2 and 5, 6 years on the job. They're just like, oh yeah, I'm done, and leave. Whereas, whenever we came on, nobody left early. I mean, unless you got injured or like maybe your spouse took a job out of state or something, then okay, yeah, you left. But for the most part, you stayed at least 25, and most people longer. And now it's not like that anymore.
No, it's very different. And that's actually one of the reasons why, at least where I'm working, we're investing so much in this wellness program, because at first it was just me, and now we're adding a couple of people. We're going to have a unit, because we're looking at it not just as it's important to take care of the people that work there. That's the priority, and their families, but it's also retention, longevity, morale, like all those things, because you're right. People are leaving our professions a lot sooner and at a higher rate than they have.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, can't really blame them with the way that the climate is today with society. I mean, especially with the police, all of the issues there, people leaving, and yeah, I don't blame them at all. And then I mean, I really don't know why people are leaving the fire department. I mean, because, it's awesome, but I think it has a lot to do with potentially, I mean, it's just a generational thing, but also our call volume. And I don't know, I would assume that it's been the same way where you're at, like call volume the last, I would say 3 to 5 years, started before the pandemic, has just gone up exponentially every year. And it just kind of was out of nowhere. Nobody saw it, and it just was here. Because I mean, we went from running, a busy company was like 3,000 runs, 3,500 runs,
something like that.
Now we're at like 9,000. And
Wow.
that's, yeah.
I don't think we're that high, but
There's a station that will
You're-
be that high.
Maybe a station.
Yeah.
So the station I left, we ran out of that station was 17,000 calls out of one station when I left. And I want to say right around 7,000 or 8,000 for a company is about where we're at. Maybe between 6 and 7.
Yeah.
But you're talking 365 days, and they're not always in service.
Yeah.
Because there's days it was shut down and stuff like that. But still, I mean, 20 calls you're like, hey, it was a good day in a 24-hour period. But it's just, I know like our cops are call after call after call. And there's no stopping. And it wears on you.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I can just like, I never thought I would ever like say this, but for years, the kind of job I did, like I would always get called in. I always wanted to be involved in whatever was happening. Cause that's when you're a detective, you work during the day, but you get called in because when things happen, you come to work. And as much as I didn't necessarily want to leave my family, I loved going to work and doing that. And now I still have a lot of friends that are still doing that. I am so grateful that I'm not doing it anymore. I mean, like I used to live for that shit. And now I'm like, whoo, thank God that's not me.
Yep.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I got a retirement calendar on my clock or on my phone counting down.
How much longer do you have?
Let's just see here. Jeremy hates when I put my phone out, so I try and do it any chance I get.
Yeah, he's always looking stuff up for the podcast.
Yeah.
I.e.
Right.
So
texting his brother.
So we have 7 years, 3 months, 5 days, 5 hours, 7 minutes, and 25 seconds to go.
Wow.
That's ridiculous.
That's when we hit our 25.
Yeah.
So it's counting down. It's getting closer.
Yeah. Well, but in issues like that, that's the reason why we need it nationwide in every department. We need stronger peer support, better mental health options. I mean, I don't know how your department is, but I know of departments where, they rely on their EAP, which it's not a bad program for if you're an accountant or, if you work in an office building somewhere or something. But in my experience, and it seems like the EAP clinicians or therapists don't really get our line of work.
Well, so, and I hear that a lot. And it's funny because especially a lot of people that I come into contact with say that, but I can actually challenge that stereotype. And I know that this is really unique, and I never realized how truly lucky we are, but we do have clinicians in our area that we vet that are outside of our EAP. We definitely have that. But the EAP that we have in our area is a brick and mortar, first of all, which is very different. Like most EAPs, you like contract, you call a number and somebody's in somewhere, you don't even know where they're at, and then they contract out. Yeah. And so it's a brick and mortar facility, and we have the people that are assigned to work with the sheriff's office are culturally competent. There's a handful of them that have been through our peer support training. They come to our quarterly training. They're very proactive, and I realize that that's very unusual.
I would say that's
really
very
lucky.
rare. Yeah.
Yes. So that's why I said I'm going to challenge you, because
Yeah.
I know that it's rare, but I didn't realize how lucky we were until I started really listening to what other people were saying. So, but you're right. I mean, even as wonderful as they are, and they work with us so well, it's limited. You still need to have other resources, as you know.
Mhm.
But the challenge is not just identifying them, but the ones that are in our area that are really good, that work with first responders, they don't have any room in their schedule, because everyone is going to see them, because it has definitely increased. So that's another problem, is that you find them, but then all the good ones, you have to like beg them to fit people in when you're kind of in desperation mode. So
well, because we're so proactive, we go before we hit the desperation mode, right?
Yeah, right. I'm glad you said that though, because I tell people to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Go when there's not something wrong, so you see what it's like before you might get to that point.
Yeah. Well, and I said the other day, because our running joke is we hate getting that call at 2 a.m. for toe pain or for the short of breath. But how long have you been short of breath? Oh, 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We do that to mental health professionals. We've been jacked up for years, but we wait until the wheels are falling off before we go, hey, I need to see somebody like right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's why, as much as we need to not do that and change that, that's why it's so important when somebody is at that point, when they're finally like, okay, I'm ready to go do this. And then you tell them, well, you have to wait a month. That's not going to work. So it's hard to kind of work that in.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the other resources come into play. I mean, I know peer support's maybe not when you're in crisis isn't the best thing, but at least it's a stopgap,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Peer support is it's so good because like you said, it's that first line. And then the people that are ideally peer support, they're able to kind of point that person in the right direction. They're not a therapist, but they at least have the knowledge, like they can listen and they can say, hey, what about this? Or what about this? Or can I connect you with this resource? Or sometimes we just need to listen to each other. And that may be all that person needs.
Yeah. I was talking to a guy last night and we were kind of having basically this same conversation about peer support. And he's like, he goes, I don't really get it. I've never been the kind to like really talk to somebody like a professional or anything. He goes, if we run a bad call or whatever, then, I just call you or I call so-and-so or whatever. And I said, that's what you're doing. You're doing the right thing. You just don't have a name for it because you're processing all of that crap and letting it go. So you're not getting to the point where you need to go see a clinician because the wheels are falling off.
Yeah, we've been doing peer support forever. We just haven't called it that.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I learned a while back when I started to really get interested in this is that like when your stress response gets activated, one of the hormones that's activated is called oxytocin, not oxycodone. And it's like that. I know, because I've said that by mistake before. So I want to make sure I preface that's not what I'm trying to say. But it's like the cuddle hormone. It's the hormone that what makes us want to connect with other people. So like when something's bothering us, you just naturally call and talk to somebody. So it's naturally like what our stress response wants us to do. But we've been told, at least I was, keep it to yourself, deal with it, suck it up, like you said before. And so it's almost like we're working against what our body naturally wants us to do when we're not doing those things.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like everybody in our career field's using a very jacked up form of compartmentalization. Just the first part, just stuff it down. Well, there's more to it than that. Come on.
It's got to come up eventually. So.
Exactly. Well, I have a clock running to see how long we've been going, but I have no idea.
I don't either.
Hang on.
He does though, because he's got his phone.
He does. That's his second retirement clock of how much longer he's going to stay with the podcast.
So it's, I'd say we've been about 45, 50 minutes.
45 or 50 minutes.
Right around that, in that area.
All right. Well, that's not terrible.
Well, how long are your podcasts when you do them?
I try not to go past an hour. That's because, and sometimes it's hard, but I try to do that because I feel like people don't really want to listen longer than an hour.
We usually try to go at least an hour and this is only because of my personal preference. Yeah. I like listening, I'd like to see the longer podcast. I don't know.
Right.
Will you help me here and tell him it's not about what he wants, it's about what they want? Because I've been saying that and he don't listen.
But you know what?
Shut up. Just let her talk.
This is very entertaining for me, by the way, because I don't do this with somebody else. I just do it by myself. So.
Oh, it's
a lot easier. I'll be honest with at least two. And like usually we got Moran here and a guest or, Howard. So usually 3 to 4 people. And it really does make it
Yeah,
easier. And
yeah, it's usually somebody's always able to pick up the conversation, so we don't get a lot of lag time. So, and Chris and I went through the academy together. So we've known each other for almost 18 years, known Moran since he came on the job 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So you guys have a third person that will podcast with you.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Gotcha.
He's normally sitting behind the computer, like kind of running everything.
Mhm.
Basically, he pushes record and then takes a nap, and
Yeah.
every now and then wakes up and talks. So, but it's fun, because we'll sit here and we make fun of each other, and we'll talk for 5 minutes on what we're talking about, and then we'll spend 20 minutes off in left field somewhere, and then we'll come back to what we were talking about. And so, yeah. No, but what were we talking about? Oh, the time length.
How long-winded you are.
Yes. I can stretch.
See, you ran her off. She's like, I'm
No,
out.
no, I
I'm
have
done.
so okay, hold on. He didn't run me off. I have a yoga room in my basement, which is also
Perfect
like
timing.
my office. So that's why you see these little flower things behind me, right? It's all zen in here.
Mhm.
So it gets really cold. So I have a heater, and now it's really hot. So I just I wasn't running away, I promise.
Yeah.
I would have ran away.
No.
But hey,
I can condense a 5-minute story into an hour and a half. So
You're gifted.
and Moran's just as bad.
Yeah. Just take the long way around, the scenic route all the time. But no, like, so the thing is, like, every time that we've had like a shorter podcast, like we'll get to like that hour, or we have some kind of time constraint of, we got to cut it off at like an hour, 20 minutes, or whatever it may be. And it seems like right as we're leading up to that time limit, that's whenever the conversation starts getting really good and we're really rolling. And then it's like, oh, gotta go. And it's like, man, you can't capture lightning twice, even though he's tried a couple times.
I have. And I've done it.
You guys have a different format though. You got a bunch of people hanging around talking, and it's just different. Like when I'm doing it, it's me just talking to somebody. So maybe it goes quicker. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. It is very different format. So we try to do it more like, the kitchen table at the firehouse.
Yes.
Where we just have that. It's just a conversation. It's not so much an interview as it is just a conversation. So.
Yeah. Well, so what do you guys think about this? Because I've been trying to talk my husband into it. I want him to, I don't know if he would be my co-host, but I want to interview my husband on the podcast.
Well, I've had Rachel on a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, okay. Thank you for telling me that. Because, some of what we do is like family, relationship, couple stuff too. And I'm like, what more perfect way to do it is like, we've been a first responder couple for 25 years. So.
See, and we've talked about doing that with both of our wives, having all four of us on here and talking to them about their perspective as being the wife of a first responder from the outside.
Yeah.
And my wife's the hang up. She doesn't want to be on camera.
Well, then, yeah, maybe you could just do an audio epised for her. Or you can have her call in or something. I don't know.
I mean, she wouldn't show up on camera. I mean, she's a ginger. So she's half vampire.
We could have her sit in Moran's chair.
Yeah, I mean,
so that way she wouldn't be on camera.
Whatever she's comfortable with. I don't care. I think it'd be a great episode still.
Yeah.
Definitely getting that different perspective.
Yeah. Well, and it's a valid perspective. And it's one that obviously we have no experience with because we've never been on that side, but the things that, they think about or worry about while we're at work,
Yeah. So have you guys heard of the podcast? I think it's called Code 4 Shoot. It's a psychologist. She's a first responder psychologist in California. She has her own podcast and she's married to a firefighter. Her and her podcast partner, they're both clinicians. One's married to a cop, one's married to a firefighter. And they talk about family wellness from that perspective, and they're clinicians. So
yeah,
I actually had her name is Dr. Rochelle Zemlock. I had her on my podcast to talk about some of that
Okay.
stuff. So it just reminds me of what you guys are talking about a little bit.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that one.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I definitely, and like in your deal, you've got two different perspectives of law enforcement. So even though you started with the federal side, you went to the local, which is, completely different than the federal. And I think that'd be a good way to compare your notes with each other and how it affects you and kind of the hoops you got to jump through to when something does happen, maybe.
Yeah. And even now, like, so my husband's retired. He was retired before I was, but he teaches Homeland Security at Wichita State University, because he retired Homeland Security. And so he's like the terrorism, Homeland Security guy, like, and he teaches all these online classes. So he still stays connected and he's able to use his...
We'll talk after
after we turn the recording off.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that.
Okay. All right. Okay. I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's a good thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Somebody's trying to get a degree.
He wants to start his own podcast actually about that kind of stuff, but he's like your wife. He doesn't necessarily want to be front and center, but he's like behind the scenes stuff.
I would listen to that.
I know.
Absolutely.
I think he's onto something. He's onto something.
Yeah. Well, and especially from that perspective, I mean, that's why I don't know if you're familiar with the Cleared Hot podcast. So he's a former Navy SEAL, Andy Stump, and he talks about that, but also a little bit of mental health and then just generic stuff. Like I guess he got into jujitsu a couple years ago. So now has like a bunch of jujitsu people on his podcast randomly and former military people, but like getting his perspective and like on issues like that I think it's pretty cool. Cause I mean, he's done stuff that, pertains to that kind of world. So.
Right. And, my husband was a Marine, and then he did this job for 20 plus years. And then now he's teaching, and he has this like lived experience. Yeah. And so it's kind of cool. He's really, the way he kind of comes up with certain things, and some of his opinions may surprise people actually.
Yeah.
Because people make assumptions about what he thinks. He's very issues driven. Like, it's not just like, oh, I'm this, kind of thing. So. Yeah.
Well, it's easier for people to connect with people who have been there and done that, So.
Yeah.
All Absolutely. Right. Well, on that note, I think we're going to go ahead and we will stop the recording. So any final thoughts, Wendy?
Ooh, I have a lot of thoughts. So it depends on what you want to hear.
Okay.
But I'll just say no. You don't want to know.
Okay. I'll let that one slide. Chris, final thoughts?
No.
You don't get to say no.
Oh man. I don't know. I think you're pretty much going to cover here in a minute. I'd say check out our podcast and hear what she's got to say. Be honest with you. That's kind of where I'm at. Because it was a good conversation. Yeah. I got you.
Thank you. And I'm going to tell people on my podcast that they need to listen to you guys. How long have you guys been around? How long have you had your podcast?
A little over a year now.
Okay.
So very cool. I think we're episode like 71, 72, something like that. So we've done a couple of little like half special episodes. So I don't know if you really want to, you count them or not count them. It just, yeah. So, all right. Well, everybody, like Chris said, check out Wendy Hummell and the Guns&Yoga podcast. Thank you so much for coming on today. It was a blast. Yeah. Final thoughts. I mean, mental health is important. We talk about it every week. So if you are struggling, reach out, talk to somebody. There are resources out there. If you know somebody that's struggling, reach out, get them connected with some resources. So with that, thanks for stopping by.